I thought it was just the other way around. Wives have life 360 on the husbands.
Okay, 7 o'clock. I'd like to call December 5th DeSoto City Council meeting to order. We'll start with roll call, please.
Lane,
Here.
Daniels,
Here.
Murdoch,
Here.
Montemichael,
Here.
Ritter.
Here.
Thank you, council. Everyone's present, Mayor.
I would ask you all to please rise. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Our first item tonight is a swearing in of our newly elected council members, Danny Lane, Lori Murdoch, and Kevin Ritter.
Raise your right hand.
Like me facing Linda.
Why don't you look at Linda? That'd take a pretty picture. On with me. I state your name.
I, Lori Murdoch,
Do hereby solemnly affirm
do hereby solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold
that I will faithfully uphold
the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
and the ordinances and code of ethics
and the ordinances and code of ethics
of the City of DeSoto
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
in the performance of my
in the
duties.
performance of my duties.
I will faithfully,
I will faithfully,
impartially,
impartially,
and justly
and justly
perform all the duties
perform all the duties
as an elected council member
as an elected council
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
member of the City of Kansas
for a four-year term,
for a 4-year term,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best
Will sign these 2 copies for
of my
me?
ability. It does say 4 years. I didn't
Yes, it
remember
does.
that.
Sure.
I said, why do we have to do this again? I didn't know it said 4 years.
That one's for you, one for me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lana.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Here, Mr. Ritter. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
All right, I'll stand out here so Lynn
Right.
can make your white brown.
Like this way?
Get over here. Raise your right hand. I
I, Kevin Ritter,
do hereby solemnly affirm
do hereby solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold
that I will faithfully uphold
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the ordinances, regulations, and the code of ethics
ordinances, regulations, and code of ethics
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
in the performance of my duties,
in the performance of my duties,
and I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
faithfully, impartially, and justly
discharge all the duties as an elected council member
discharge all the duties of an elected council member
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
for a 4-year term,
for a 4-year term,
according to the best.
according to the best.
Sign these for me, please. One more. One for you and one for me. All righty. Thank you sir. This one's for you. Congratulations. Mr. Danny. On your Bible. All righty. I, Danny Lane,
I, Danny Lane,
do hereby and solemnly affirm
do hereby and solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States,
that I will faithfully uphold the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the Constitution of the State of Kansas,
the ordinances, regulations, and the code of ethics
the ordinance, regulations, and code of ethics
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
in the performance of my duties,
in performance of my duties,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
impartially, and justly
impartially, and justly
discharge all the duties
discharge all the duties
as an elected council member
as an elected council member
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
of the City of DeSoto, Kansas,
for a 4-year term,
for a 4-year term,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Sign this for me. One more, and one for you.
Okay. Thank you, Lana.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor,
All right, thank
You have your council.
Congratulations to our new council members. Our new old. All right, let Danny and Lana get situated, and then we will carry on. Our next item is a public hearing. We have a public hearing regarding the proposed issuance of industrial revenue bonds in an approximate principal amount of $18 million in abatement of ad valorem taxes for property purchased with the proceeds of such bonds. Do you want to introduce this?
Yes, Council, I included a memo, short memo in the packet. Thank you, Rob. Sort of explaining what we're doing here. We do have Kevin Wimpy, the city's bond counsel, and I've asked him to address the council briefly about what you have before you. Unfortunately, Jeff White nor Jim Pritchard could make it here this evening. You do have a copy of their cost-benefit analysis. It's fairly straightforward. But with that, I'd just like to introduce Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell.
Yeah, good evening. Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel. So talking with Patrick, I think tonight we'll give you a quick overview of the IRB 101, I'll call it, and sort of the process there, and then second jump into tonight's actions and what's before you and where we're at in that process. And so to start with IRBs, again, the purpose of IRBs are a vehicle for granting an incentive, and it's typically there are two, and one is sales tax exemption on construction materials, and secondly, property tax abatement. And in Kansas, you're limited to 10 years of that by state law of property tax abatement. So even though they're bonds, to compare them to your GO bonds, there's no third-party bank wiring funds here. This is what we call buy your own bond structure. So a company would purchase its own bond, privately finance its own costs. So it's not really a real financing vehicle, and instead, again, is just a vehicle for granting the incentives. Probably most importantly to the city, there's no liability for repayment of industrial revenue bonds. So the city's general fund and credit isn't at risk with issuance of IRBs. To jump into where we're at in the process, so this was kicked off by the company submitting an application, again, for $18 million of industrial revenue bonds. The ask was for a 10-year, 75% property tax abatement to go along with that, the property financed with the IRBs. Meaning the company, as part of the bond issue, would enter into a performance agreement to pay approximately 25% of what we'll say would be full property tax at that point. So in that sense, this mirrors exactly the ask from several years ago on a prior expansion of the facility. Pursuant to state law, you're required to prepare a cost-benefit analysis, which we mentioned was performed by Columbia Capital Management. You're also required to have a public hearing, and notice thereof needs to be given to the school district and county by letter and also published in the newspaper. And both those items have been accomplished prior to tonight's public hearing. Even though there is a hearing and notice provided to those jurisdictions, unlike other forms of incentives, there's no veto right of other taxing jurisdictions with IRBs. So it's strictly the discretion of you all, the city council, to grant these incentives. The items tonight before you, following the public hearing later in the meeting, are consideration of a resolution of intent to issue IRBs, and secondly, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of those bonds. So if you recall, a couple of years ago, in the process with Intervet, there were a couple of resolutions of intent adopted at that time with larger figures, looking forward to future expansion. But at that time, these state law steps were not jumped through or accomplished strictly for the purpose of returning this to you tonight at a later date with these things accomplished to consider each specific expansion as it occurred. So the ordinance approves the documents that go along with the bond issuance, including the performance agreement and the pilot percentage I mentioned earlier. And if approved by you tonight, we'd proceed to closing later this month, which by state law would trigger the property tax abatement beginning in 2020 and continuing for up to a period of 10 years. So that's the highlights of the actions tonight. I'm happy to field any questions or go into more detail as you see fit.
Questions from council?
And I should also mention, we do have representatives of the applicant here, and they're prepared to discuss the project in more detail.
Okay.
So to be clear, the abatement's on the improved value or total value?
Yeah, good question. It's on the incremental increased improved value, so just the 18 million financed with the bonds, not the entire existing facility.
Okay. So, if there's no questions, then we would open the public hearing then to comment?
Yep.
Okay. I now call the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to comment regarding this matter, please come to the podium. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. So we'll move on to,
Yeah, the resolution of intent and the other action items, the ordinance authorizing the IRBs are items later in the agenda.
okay. You want to tackle them now or just take them when they
No,
come?
I think let's get them when
All
they,
right.
yeah.
Get them when
as
they come
come.
on the agenda?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Our next item is our consent agenda. On tonight's consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes from our council meeting of November 21st and approval of pay ordinance number 867. Any discussion or?
Actually, I have a question on the agenda. Item 3A, consider non-discrimination ordinance. Are we looking at attempting to take action on that tonight, or is that just a continuation of discussion?
Just more discussion, most likely, yeah.
Okay, so no action
I don't
tonight.
anticipate we're
Okay.
ready to take any action yet.
Then is it possible that we could move 3A till after the new business so that our company representatives can get done and out of
Sure.
here before that discussion?
I don't have a problem. Anybody have an issue with that? No, I agree. Okay. We'll take, move item 3A to follow 4D. You want to follow that up with a motion then?
Motion to move the old business 3A until after consideration of calling for Parks Bond referendum on 4B, or 4D.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and you want to approve the agenda then?
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, we will move to item 2, call to public. Members of the public welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business not listed on tonight's agenda. The comments discussed under call to public may or may not be acted on by the council during this meeting. There's a 4-minute time limit. Does anyone wish to address the council tonight under call to public? Certainly, step up, Mike.
Okay, if I speak from here, will that work?
I think so.
Yeah, let me get that mic turned on. Okay.
Just walk softly or.
Thank you.
Come back with a vacuum after
Otherwise,
we're done.
the video won't pick you up.
Gotcha. Fair enough. All right. Well, good evening. I was asked to give an update by Mike Brunghart, so came in. We missed our deadline. We have a few more spots. Sunflower is complete, and that has been turned over on 95th Street from, there we go, Sunflower to Lexington. There's a little that little red spot right there where that creek crossing, we're about halfway through that creek crossing, so we should be able to finish that up tomorrow. And so that'll be complete. Continuing to head east from Lexington all the way down. Yeah, that red section is actually done. The creek crossing's already done. Keep heading east.
Okay, that's done?
That's done. So we've got a few where you got a lot of these dots. We have a few sections in here. We need to excavate some rock and then tie all those together. The one on the very far east areas is where I got all the mud on my boots.
That's where you were.
Yeah. So
for the council's benefit, this is the map. I sent this map out by a link this afternoon, so you might check your email. It's kind of an interactive thing. If you click on these little icons here, you'll get pictures that were taken either yesterday or today of the progress.
Kill Creek, all the way to Corliss, has already been proofed and turned over. The K-10 shot north on Kill Creek is done as well. And then heading east of Corliss, there's just a handful of addresses here. Let's see. At 29, 520, 570, and 600. That's going to be that section right in there. There's 3 driveways that need to be bored under. There's a water line that crosses, and it comes in pretty shallow. So we got some rock to drill, and also around that water line. The very last driveway there, before the big hill falls off, where that yellow line starts on the left side.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
one? Okay.
Yeah, right in there. We got the one on the left, the one on the right, and we've tried 5 different times. We're going to try another a couple things. If not, we're going to have to contact the homeowner and open cut the driveway and restore it. But from there all the way across is done. So
this bridge.
Bridge attachment's already on. Yep. There's a bore shot that heads from the north side to the south side. That's done. And then going all the way down, that K-10 shot's done. So those are the sections that are remaining. There's if I remember right, about 500-600 feet approximately remaining. And then we'll kind of go through, get everything tied up, and start hauling rock for several weeks in dirt.
For the restorations. You mean.
For the restoration piece, yeah. There's a lot of sections in between Lexington and Kill Creek. There just wasn't enough dirt to put back, so we had 40 tons of dirt dumped there, but we're going to need some more, quite a bit more.
Good. Well, so then for the council's benefit, on this, and check your emails. If you can't access the map, let me know. But we're going to try our best to keep this as up-to-date daily as we can. So if you ever wonder what the situation is, if something gets done and, these pictures aren't pulling up. I don't know why I can't click on those and pull them. But those are kind of pictures of restoration areas. As those areas get restored, we'll take new pictures and post them here. So I think it's probably a better way to kind of, easier for us and maybe better for you too, to kind of see the daily progress rather than a memo and map each week. So yeah, RG's been, working back in town now for 2.5 weeks or so.
Yep.
making good progress each day. And we know the stuff that's left to be done is the hardest stuff that was really on the project. So, we'll be looking to complete that completion deadline 1, get all this conduit completed, buried, backfilled, tested, and turned over to us. So we can turn over to our sublease and get that process going. And then, with an eye toward that second completion date being January 18th, to provide service to all these, make service available for any customer in those unserved areas. And during that time, these restorations will be our focus.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Best guess on timeline, I think we'll be able to work with the city early next week to proof the remaining conduit, and then we'll start the restoration process. We do have fiber blown down Sunflower, and then Sunflower about halfway down towards Lexington on 95th. And then we don't have any from Lexington to Kill Creek. That remains. And then Kill Creek all the way to Corliss already has fiber in it. And so from Corliss all the way down, we'll need to blow fiber in. But that's been going pretty smooth for us.
Fiber is or isn't in it?
In most of the sections that have been completed and turned over, fiber is already installed, and we already have customers and service available in those areas.
How far down 95th to the east does fiber run right now?
Right now to Corliss Court. Yep. And we had, sorry. Oh.
We're just saying it's close.
It's close to you. No, I'm still down further.
Yeah.
But you stated you're having trouble with the driveway right there, right?
Yeah, that last one, we,
Maybe probably that one.
yeah, I think we've spent 20 some,
Is that before the new bridge?
yeah, so it's that real steep hill that you go down right before Happy Valley Farm on the north side. It's that last driveway right there. We've spent 20 hours chiseling rock on both sides. A little over 20 hours, so. Oh yeah, if you got a pick, it's
I can't open those. I can't open those pictures for some reason.
Open it in a new tab. Is that what you just did? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I did that. And
I will give
Going
you.
as
We'll
a
work on
textile.
that.
It worked on mine.
Yeah.
I
I'll
looked
work
at
on
them
mine
this
too.
afternoon, so that was
Okay.
where I could see everything.
Yeah, we're down about 4.5 foot. We need to get down another 2 foot because the slope on that particular driveway.
Okay.
Yep.
Questions from council?
No, just comment that section of the road that's kind of beat up on 95th, just kind of like to the west of Kill Creek. Will you be fixing that, or does our city fix that? I mean, there's like a chunk of the road out.
Oh, that's on us. We'll be
Okay.
fixing that.
I mean, it'd be nice to get that done sooner than later, just because
Yep.
to me, it's a hazard there.
Yeah, you talked
Sure.
about getting asphalt in.
Yeah, we already had asphalt. It was the flow fill that
Okay.
with our supplier was back ordered, so for whatever reason. But we have the flow fill now.
Okay. And that's just west of Kill Creek.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming in. I just asked Mike this afternoon if he's in town, if he could make it here for a quick update. So I appreciate you knocking
bet.
some of the mud off your boots and coming
Yep.
in.
Thanks. Sorry. And again.
All right. Anyone else under call to public tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will close that part of our agenda and move on to item 4A. Consider a resolution determining the intent of the city to issue industrial revenue bonds to finance an industrial project for the benefit of Intervet Incorporated. So this is what we were just informed about, correct?
Mayor, I believe the applicant wanted to
Okay.
address council. Probably be an appropriate time.
Would the applicant like to address the council about this matter at this time? You're on.
I'm Ron Wilms, plant engineer from Merck Animal Health. We're doing business as Merck Animal Health, but all the documents are under Intervet, which is our licensed or named. Just as you may or may not know, is at DeSoto we manufacture vaccines primarily for cattle and swine for distribution throughout the U.S. and 43 countries around the world. So we are an international distributor of animal health vaccines. The most recent expansion that's part of this industrial revenue bond will double our manufacturing capacity by the middle of next summer. It includes additional manufacturing suites as well as additional utilities to support our manufacturing facility. We still, for our 5-year plan, we have additional to keep on track for about another $20 to $30 million a year in capital expansion. That's on track, and that's approved in the budget until it actually happens and becomes realization. I can't say that it's going to happen, but that's what the plan is right now, is to keep the building in progress and going. Since 2014, we've added over 50 jobs to the site. We're about 160 head count, and we're over 215 right now. And I can tell you right now, I currently have 3 additional buildings under design we hope to start construction sometime next summer. So I expect to be back here again for additional revenue bonds as we continue to expand at DeSoto. So we appreciate your help and support for our projects.
All right. Well, we appreciate your investment in our community. Any questions from council?
I have one, but I don't know that it pertains to the next one, so I'd hate to have you sit down and then come back.
That's all right.
In the agreement, it talks about in section 13, being a community supporter of the chamber and the EDC, and I just like to ask. We asked the last developer that came for incentives to join the EDC at a higher level. And we just ask that you would consider.
I'm sure we can work on that and support that.
Thank you.
I've talked to the new plant manager, and we are in agreement with that. That's not a problem.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I might need a reminder to be sure it happens, but
I know just the girl. Thanks.
Okay. Comments, thoughts, questions from council?
I was on council when we have been through this quite a few times before, so I don't think have any questions right now, or other than supporting
everybody
it.
here. I mean, we talked about, Merck presented their plan for a big expansion project, and we indicated our willingness to, or our desire to have them stay here and discuss the potential for this several years ago. So I was thinking we were all part of that previous discussion.
No, but it has been discussed at various times. When we had the incentive workshop, I think we talked about it then. It's come up from time to time, so I'm certainly familiar with at least the fact that it's there.
Okay.
Another question. How many jobs will the expansion potentially bring in then?
The current expansion for what we have for this industrial revenue bonds, the jobs have already been hired because we have to train our people. It takes 6 to 9 months to get our techs up to speed before they can go into manufacturing and production. We expect the first manufacturing suites to be online by January, at least from a capacity standpoint, we're planning on it. So the additional jobs will come. Part of it is expansion of our research and development areas, and I can't say from an actual head count, it's probably going to vary. So I'm not as the engineering manager, I'm probably not the one to speak to that.
Okay.
So the completion of the project will be done in January. So
first phase will be done in January for our manufacturing suites. For our additional capacity, we have a new central utilities building under construction to support the manufacturing building. We're planning on doing tie-ins in it in April-May timeframe. We're getting the roof on it hopefully here in the next week or two and get it closed in for winter construction is the plan. So we spent about $100,000 this year in building permits. So I know that Bill and those people are quite aware of that. We've got quite a lot going on. So
Yes, they are very aware. Yes, they are.
Well, thank you for being here.
You bet. Thank you.
resolution number?
So, yeah.
1021.
I'll make a motion then. We approve resolution 1021, determine the intent of the city of DeSoto to issue its internal revenue bonds in the aggregate amount not to exceed $18 million to finance the cost of acquiring, constructing, and equipping a commercial project for the benefit of Intervet Inc. or its successors and assigns.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Patrick. Does the mayor vote on this?
No.
Motion is carried, Mayor.
Okay. Then the follow-up item is to consider an ordinance authorizing the issuance of industrial revenue bonds not to exceed $18 million.
I might just comment on that. I put at your desk the pilot agreement. So by approving the ordinance, you're also approving the pilot agreement. And it essentially tracks the pilot. The last time Intervet was before you, there have been a few changes. Those are reflected in red in the version that was put on your desk. So just wanted to point that out, that this will be part of the approval once you approve the ordinance.
Okay.
That will be ordinance number 2482.
Any questions on the ordinance from council?
No, just the comments I made earlier. Thank you.
And noted Kevin's comment earlier on the encouraging participation at the higher level on the EDC in the pilot agreement.
All right, I'll make a motion, then we approve ordinance 2482, authorizing the issuance of the city of DeSoto, Kansas, not to exceed 18 million aggregate principal amount of taxable industrial revenue bonds, Intervet Inc. Project Series 2019. Do you need me to read all that? You got it, right? Okay. And on and on.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion, questions? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Thank you, council. The motion carried.
All right. Moving on. Consider bids for storm sewer repairs on 84th Street.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is a pretty straightforward project, actually right down the street from City Hall. We've got a issue where actually a hole's opened up west of our parking lot, and is also, as you can kind of see, this is the section that goes underneath the street, but the pipe is in pretty poor condition, and actually, you can't see, we had some other pictures taken as well, but as the pipe goes underneath the street, it gets actually kind of turned, and it's clearly not flowing correctly, and it's actually starting to undercut some of the road base. The road itself is not sagged or anything, but it's becoming a clear problem, and there's also, like I said, there's a hole that's going to open up south of that sidewalk that we do have cones and tape and fencing around, but we wanted to get this taken care of, so we bid this item and had 6 bidders. Blue Nile Contractors was the low bidder. They will be following our standard procedures with bonds and all the typical things that we have required through our projects. As you can also see, we've got a little bit of what we had asked them to bid on, which was the 100 feet of 30-inch pipe and 60 feet of 12-inch diameter pipe, and then installing some riprap, repairing the road and sidewalk as well. With that, we've talked to Blue Nile. They're ready as soon as we can get approval from the council to get this done. We probably will have the asphalt is one of those things now that we're moving into a colder section. We might have flowable fill on that section in the street until we can get some asphalt in on either a warm enough day or might have to wait till next spring for that. With that, I will stand for any questions you might have.
So this is bad enough that we need to do it. We need to tackle it now before the spring
Yeah,
rains
it
and-
really is, and it's actually been a problem probably we got this, it's probably a couple months ago before I mean, it takes us time to get these things going, but yeah, it's getting worse.
Okay.
And
Questions from council? Anybody else? Have we ever worked with Blue Nile before?
I'm not aware if we have, Mike, unless
I
you've
don't, I
had.
don't think the city has. I don't think we have.
We've checked their, did you check a reference on them or?
I haven't really called any references. I did have spoken to them. I mean, they do a lot of municipal type work. They're in actually Kansas City, Missouri, but
Yeah.
haven't really run across any reason to think that they're not a legitimate professional contractor.
I'll make a motion to accept the bid from Blue Nile Contractors, Inc. of Kansas City, Missouri to complete the 84th Street and storm pipe repair, and in an amount not to exceed $38,173.55, and enter into an agreement to complete the work.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Monaco.
Yes.
Council, motion carried.
Okay. Item D, consider resolution calling for Parks and Recreation bond referendum.
Yes, council, you recall at the last meeting, we took a look at this same resolution. Councilman Daniels brought up a good point about the language had just could have been read a little bit confusing as to where the sports complex would be located. So if you look at page 2 under section 2, I've modified the language to read that the sports complex to be located on land owned or to be acquired by the city of DeSoto. So that would give us the flexibility to put that on land the city already owns or land acquired as part of this referendum.
Okay. Any questions from council? Any?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Do we have a resolution number?
Maybe 1022 then?
That is correct, Mayor.
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 1022, authorizing and providing for the calling of a special an election in the city of DeSoto, Kansas, for the purpose of submitting to the electors of the city the question of issuing general obligation bonds of the city for the purpose of financing the cost of certain capital improvements and providing for the giving of notice of said election.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion regarding the motion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Monaco,
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Thank you, council, motion carried.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Just a short update. I mean, we talked at the park board meeting, I guess it was just Monday night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Talked about communication plan that would be rolled out for this, and then a prioritization of projects that how we would tackle, which projects we would do first in the calendar, knowing we can't do them all at once. And I think that will probably be coming to the council at the January,
Yeah,
our first meeting in
first meeting in
January.
January.
The park board thoughts on those items for everybody to consider and talk about. So
Yeah, so I think, as we discussed, a public information campaign, to make sure the voters know what's being proposed and what's on the list. So Whitney's going to be instrumental in that, and the park board's really been focusing on that in the last couple of meetings. This is, and I can send this out to you all tomorrow, kind of a frequently asked questions or questions that may be asked from voters, and some answers there relating to the referendum. The other thing the park board wanted to do is give some sort of priority to the list of projects In the event that we don't have enough money to fund them all, that the voters have at least some indication of which ones we are prioritizing, and that we're certain that we're going to be doing, and then maybe apply some time frame to that too, because it's going to take 24 to 36 months to implement all these. Which ones are they going to see first? That sort of thing.
That was it. I just wanted to let y'all know where we were at on that.
Thank you.
All right. We have made it through new business, so we will go to 3A, consider non-discrimination ordinance. So we brought this up at our last meeting. Patrick has put together a draft ordinance for us to talk about. We can talk about it, or I had thought, I think Danny had maybe mentioned we might want to consider a work session where we can spend a little time and talk about it, knowing that we need a little time to read, digest, and bring our thoughts forward. So if we want to talk about it tonight, that's great, or if we want to consider a work session sometime, probably not going to be able to happen before the end of the year, but for early in January, we could do a work session and discuss this ordinance and our thoughts and how we want to bring this forward here in DeSoto. So any thoughts or anything from the council on that, I would entertain right now. Want to just carry on a discussion, or?
I think a discussion is probably all right.
Okay.
If anybody has a
We'll
lot.
see where we are,
I
and if
guess
we
I
think we
kind of
need
need
more
to figure
time,
out
we
where
can
everybody
certainly-
stands on it and what the questions
Yeah.
that are still outstanding.
Sure.
It sounds like people have done homework and figured out, what other cities are doing and what is out there. So
I guess in an update, Olathe passed theirs earlier this week. I don't know if you guys followed that in the paper. Monday night, I think, they considered theirs again, and it was passed.
Yeah, I got a chance to visit with Mayor Copeland today about it.
Was that the chamber lunch?
No, I just ran into him.
Oh, okay.
I there's a few little odds and ends questions through here, but that I've got on the language. But when I read it and kind of digested it, one, as long as we're picking up on what other cities have learned and some of their best practices, because we've had several sophisticated cities, not that we're not sophisticated, but several cities with big staffs, and an opportunity to do this, they've gone through it already. So let's just pick from the best of theirs. But really, I think from me reading it, and what Patrick has boiled this down to, is really pretty straightforward. I see it as just predominantly a statement of fairness and equity in our community, that we want to say that we're a community that doesn't tolerate discrimination of various sorts. This one picking up one that hasn't otherwise been codified in other laws. And I also don't see it, and I think most of the other cities are the same way. They're really not, it says a non-discriminatory regulation, but it's not like it's a burdensome regulation. It's not imposing that anybody do something other than don't discriminate, right? We're not saying you got to build anything. We're saying you got to report anything to anybody. We're just saying that if you don't discriminate based on gender identity or sexual orientation, then really you would never even know that this ordinance existed. And so I don't see it as anything that is creating any burden or problem. And it's really kind of the flip side, especially now that the other communities around us have all passed it. It's not like we're charging out here with some great new idea that's really, changing the world and leading the way. It's kind of now going, well, let's don't get left behind. The greater Johnson County area has already kind of weighed in on this, and we don't want to be, in my mind, we don't want to be left behind. And so to say, well, we would want to turn something like this down or not consider it, almost says, well, we're kind of okay with people discriminating in this particular manner, because we don't want to take the same stand that other people have and bring that into it. So, again, and I think the only people that would object to it or feel imposed upon by it are people who want to discriminate. If you're a landlord who wants to judge who can or can't rent from you, then yeah, it would probably change their behavior, maybe not. Same way with, wanting to go in and go to a pizza, go eat a pizza at the pizza shop, well, I guess it infringes on that shop owner if they want to discriminate, but if they don't want to discriminate, it's totally irrelevant. So I kind of see it as just something that, it's really kind of a no-brainer, saying, yeah, it's just adding to the list of ways that we want to behave and be fair. And, I think of it as if I've got a family member or a friend, and my guess is everybody on here knows somebody that's impacted by this in some way or another. My guess is, maybe not. I know a few. And to think that, a good friend of mine's going to have trouble renting an apartment, because of that, which they do, right? Or keep holding a good job where they're a good employee, right? We're not saying you have to employ people or you have to put up a poor performance. We're just saying if they're a good worker, don't treat them differently than your other good workers, right? And if you do, this is only an avenue for somebody to come in and say, hey, I don't feel like I was treated right in your community. And we lay out a process for that. So I don't know, this seems like a really simple idea to me. And so I don't know why I'm just weighing in obviously first here, and we'll see where everybody's at. But man, I don't know why we don't act on it. That'd be my opinion. I don't know why we wouldn't need a workshop, but that's my opinion on it.
If it is that much of a no-brainer, why has it not been done at the state and federal levels?
Because I think it probably has become too politicized. And I think that's why this is something that's just being addressed at the grassroots level, at the local level,
But
where we're saying
this isn't as benign and simple as it's made out to seem. Whenever you're imposing, and the civil rights that are outlined of race, sex, and those are physical characteristics that are defined and scientifically capable of being proven. You're getting into an area here where with gender identity, which also includes gender fluidity, where I can change my mind, you are telling employers and taking choice away from the employers based upon somebody else's choice. And you're saying that they are now liable to have to go into mediation, into potential liability if they choose not to employ somebody based upon those characteristics, as opposed to skill, talent, and upholding their branding and capabilities. So where do you draw the lines? Because prior to last week, when we talked about public accommodations, that opened this up to bathrooms, opened this up to biological males entering the female bathrooms at the pool house. So this goes beyond that, where by imposing as a government, when we impose regulations like this, we are taking choices away from other people. And even the religious exemption is exempting the not-for-profits. But what about somebody that has a religious conviction that's running a business that's a not-for-profit? They're now being held to standards or beliefs that they may not agree with. And so you're taking choice from, giving choice to some, but taking it from others when you're moving into areas that are subjective, like gender identity. And I actually had a long discussion with my brother today, and it was actually pretty interesting because when I brought it up, he backed off. I mean, he didn't back off. He pretty much was like, yeah, no, that's not the way to handle it. And it gets real sticky, and it's not as clear-cut as it's made out to be.
If I can just address a few of the comments, and I understand this is, maybe a tough issue to, there are many different viewpoints on it, but I would just mention that as to the bathroom issue, as indicated in the memo, this does nothing on either side of that issue. It doesn't put the city in a position, I mean, the way I've prepared it completely, that is not any different of an issue than it was 3 months ago before this issue even came up. It's not, and as I attached, there are a lot of, particularly schools, struggling with that issue. It is being discussed at the federal level and state level, but that issue is not really affected by these regulations. And then the other thing I would, and similar to as Kep mentioned, I sort of view it as somewhat of a civility code in some way, because if, as you mentioned, as an employer, you have objections based on religious grounds, these regulations incorporate the Kansas freedom of religion legislation, and what that law says is that no city can pass a law that burdens a good faith religious belief. So if that's what you're holding to, that's why you object to doing something that you feel would run afoul of these regulations, the Religious Accommodation Act would override, and that gets to the good faith belief. You can't, that may be subject to some type of proceeding to determine if you truly have a good faith religious belief that you feel is being infringed on. But with that being the case, then you do kind of come to this, basket of, so why are you treating, if it's not a good faith religious belief, then what is it? And true, that may violate these regulations, but, and that's why I said in the memo, I made several references. This is in the regulations that we're talking about intentional discrimination. It's not a, catching it. This is intentionally, as Kevin mentioned, this is where when you just don't like, someone's mannerisms or that's what these regulations are aimed at. So, but again, I understand it's a tough, obviously other communities have struggled with this, so I'm not trying to, minimize the difficulty around it, but.
Yeah, on the bathroom thing, I mean, it's, hey, guy drags their young daughter into the men's bathroom at Arrowhead Stadium because they don't want her standing out there, or my wife would have to drag my son into the women's bathroom. I mean, you get those little peculiarities anyway, but I'm honestly more concerned about, some real pervert guy in the men's room than I am somebody who's, I don't think you get cases where you go, oh, there's, a gay individual or a lesbian individual that shows up in the other bathroom to harass. That's covered in the lewd and lascivious conduct.
It's already
in
the law,
here.
right?
And I wrote in my note here, I'm more concerned about those not covered by this ordinance that behave in lewd and lascivious ways, right? I guess as I read this and looked at it and looked at what others have done, I liked your term. It's more of a civility code in that it creates a situation for somebody to have a way to file a grievance where they feel they've been treated unjustly because of this specific situation.
So under gender identity definition, where it says actual or perceived gender-related identity, expression, appearance, or mannerisms, would that be how they dress? Would that be what level of identification would that involve and include? Would that be if I believe to be that my expression is that of a drag queen? Would that be, where is the line? Where is the thing? Another second example is I hire somebody and then they decide they are something different than what I hired after hire. And that's not a theoretical example. That is a true example of one of my colleagues where they were hired under one identity and then they decided they were a completely different identity. So,
But let me ask, in that case, was their sexual identity a requirement of the job?
Did it affect their
And
performance?
then did it
on
affect
the
their performance?
work
And that's what I'm
job?
asking is,
but as
just
an
because
employer,
somebody's
if I
gay-
hire a male and now they've changed to be a female,
did they do just as good of a job as a,
so I don't have the right to determine that change
is a
is
terminable
going to
offense?
affect my clients. We live in an at-will world. We are taking at-will away to some level whenever we pass these ordinances. So it's a matter of what freedom, what liberties do you give the employers and let the clients decide that they're being fair or unfair versus what do we actually impose governmentally on them. And this is where I really start to come back to be far more on the libertarian side of the employers should be able to choose the skills and the skill sets and the representation that they want.
In my
Do you
case,
feel
I'm
the
an
same
employer.
way about the discrimination or anti-discrimination that are already on board? I mean, you can't discriminate because of this, and that already.
Those are things
Right?
people don't have a choice on. They don't choose their gender identity. They don't choose whether they're biologically, scientifically male or female. Gender identity is defined as fluidity, and there's not science really supporting it at this point. It's a social construct of a choice that they're making.
And they're also on some of the other things like it's happening in Kansas City right now on discrimination on their past evictions and payment of people renting to people who have these past problems, and they're discriminating against them, saying, well, you've already been evicted from these places here. I therefore don't want to have you rent my property if you're not going to pay. And it's going to take me a year to get you out of there.
But that's a credit
Well, they have
issue. That's not a,
discrimination that can be added to these.
But that's a credit thing.
That's a
though.
credit
That
thing.
has to do with if you're not paying where you're at, you can, I mean, that's anywhere
Yeah.
now. You know, if you have bad
Yeah,
credit,
but
you're
we
not
don't
going to
have
get
an
your rental.
ordinance against that either.
well, no, you're right.
And, you know, and that's a discrimination, is it not?
No, I think
not
that's
So it's not
that's a
discrimination
responsibility.
if you
It's
decide
not
that-
discrimination, it's
and I say
responsibility.
that you don't pay your rent, and so I'm not gonna rent to you?
I think
Would
that's
that
a
be
matter of your,
discrimination against you?
No, not
Kevin?
discrimination.
You don't think so?
no,
No.
not at all. Not at
I
all.
wouldn't consider
That's
that.
based on, right,
A
it's,
business.
that's a criteria. And you know what, I can hire or not hire people because of maybe what they can or can't lift, right? Or whether or not they can be on their feet for 6 hours a day or something like that. But that's a performance criteria. I'm not discriminating against them because they can't lift 40 pounds. It's a performance criteria. And same way people paying the ability to pay their rent.
We have those regulations on the fire department, if they can't lift 45 pounds, they don't hire them.
Right, but that's not discrimination.
No, it's not discrimination.
Just like not,
Job requirement.
it's a job requirement,
Okay.
right? And a credit worthiness is something completely valid also. It's not discrimination.
One of the questions we had at our last discussion was what the school district had done. And in following up, they passed a non-discrimination policy early this year. It's actually, I believe, a student-led initiative that the board took on early this year and after action from, I don't know which school, if it was one school or the other or both, but I know that it was student-led in reading the minutes and that it was passed early in the school year. So wanted to provide that information.
Thank you for checking on that.
And the law that was pending in the state of Kansas, and it kind of goes along with what you were mentioning. Again, these regulations, I feel like this doesn't affect that issue at all, but the law that was pending in Kansas that never passed would have applied to schools, and it I don't know the exact verbiage, but it essentially would have mandated that you as a student, you're classified according to your biological gender when you were born at birth. And that's what all the federal litigation is about. And there's been only one state that has passed a law along those lines, and it was North Carolina, and they repealed it. So there's no state in the entire country that gets at the issue that I think we're talking about, that, look, people shouldn't be able to change their gender. All I'm saying, as a city, that's really not an issue we can wade into, because at the federal level there are, the EEOC has a position, and there are positions that would say that is a protected classification or disability. So if that's the sort of the objection, that, we shouldn't have to worry about, people that want to change their identity. I'm just saying
So if an employer doesn't agree with calling them by their identified cis, zis, whatever pronouns they want to be called by, would they have a complaint under this?
Well, they could file a complaint, but I think another thing that's important, you're going to have an investigator and a hearing officer. So 2 levels, even at the investigator, if you look at the investigation level, the investigator does not have to do anything with this if they don't feel like there's legitimacy or merit to the complaint. And then, of course, once you get to the hearing officer, again, nothing has happened until the hearing officer hears all the evidence and then makes a determination.
But if they're intentionally calling them Mr. or Mrs., he or she, when they choose something otherwise, would they have a complaint because it's intentional?
Well, I guess why would you then want to do that?
Well, who pays for that?
What do you mean? Who pays for what?
For this
complaint process?
Between the two,
Yeah. That would be the city. The city would
have to pay?
Yeah, the city would either or could use in-house. We could. The way it's set up now is the mayor and city administrator would jointly choose an investigator and a hearing officer. So if the mayor and city administrator, determined that there was someone on staff that could be the investigator or be the hearing officer, obviously you'd want it to be someone completely
Partial.
detached from whatever the situation is. You could do that, or you could, nominate people outside of the city.
And it says if you go to mediation, then you split the cost.
Right.
So that you share the cost.
What do we think? I mean,
I'm in favor of the language that was provided. I'm in favor of the theory that's here. I think it's good for our community to say that we're fair, that we're inclusive, and that if somebody wants to be discriminatory, then it gives the person to whom they've discriminated against an opportunity to be heard out on it. And like Patrick said, maybe there's no merit to it, but maybe there is. I think there's less downside of confusion or debate over how things are interpreted than there is upside from just a feeling or a statement that we're non-discriminatory in many ways, and we're going to treat each other fairly, and that's the way we want our community to be. And then, not that you have to do anything everybody else did, but I think it would look odd. It would set DeSoto out to not do it after most of Johnson County has. So why are you guys different? Because this isn't something we're leading the charge on. This is something we're one of the last to do.
Lori?
I too want to be fair with everyone. I don't want to discriminate because of anyone's sexual preference, or orientation, or gender identity. I know there's little things that, not little things, but there's things that Rob are bringing up that, it seems to me though that most of them are I don't know, it's almost like it's treating people wrongly, in my opinion, that have chosen to have a gender identity, a gender change. But it's not just them, there's, anyone who is gay or lesbian, they have their choice and it's their preference. And I don't feel that that's, my point to judge that or them. It seems like what we're putting forth here is just really just saying that as a city, we're not going to discriminate against people that way. So
The number one reason I have heard to pass this is other cities have done it. The state hasn't done it. The federal hasn't done it. So the fact that other cities is the number one reason I've heard is not something I buy into. When I don't discriminate people, I treat people fairly. I've got friends that are gay and bisexual. My brother's gay. I've got friends that are in some of the gender identity section. But telling an employer that because somebody else chooses something, not it's because that's what they biologically, scientifically are, or have been actual true diagnosed of mental disease or physical disability, that an employer has to acquiesce to that is not something that I think is there. Our country was founded on negative liberties in the sense of the government being limited in their power and freedoms, and this only takes it away. And I don't think that this is going to make anybody more fair or less fair in dealing with it. But I think that we also haven't had time to take it to the constituents and find out what a number of our residents think. It came up pretty quick. And I don't think somebody that disagrees with this is necessarily treating people unfairly, wrongfully, or has ill motive to it. I just don't think that they necessarily agree with the science behind some of it and the fact that we should have freedom of choice in some level of discrimination, because we do discriminate in areas. If I have a employee that comes in with a nose ring like a bull, which my gay brother did, he would absolutely say you've got to remove it or fire it. If they choose to have tattoos and want to expose them, and I'm dealing in a professional world, we're going to have some level of discrimination. So letting an employer choose skills and representation the way that an employer should be free to do, when it's not something, or when it's something that's a choice, the employer should have that at-will choice.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Rob. Kevin, anything to add?
No, I think the most important thing with me is that, I want to, just make sure that we're fair and equal, and that we don't discriminate against any of our citizens or public or anyone. My hope here was that as a council we would all be on the same consensus and vote unanimously in a show of faith of one way or the other. I'm not against moving forward, but and putting it behind us.
Okay. Danny, would you like to add anything?
I don't want to see us discriminate against any person or persons whatsoever. But I have a few things that I'm worried about that's going to stick into this that is going to change, and I'm just worried about that. But as far as being fair, I'm 100% behind it, and I don't want to see us discriminate against anybody either.
Mayor, can I add one thing? I really want to pick up on something that Rob said, and that is about freedom and liberty. And I guess I see this as something that does help create freedom through saying we don't want to discriminate, for people to be able to freely go out and rent an apartment, go into the pizza shop, employment issues, be treated fairly for doing a good job. And I think it's more about people who are kind of, I'll call it routine gay or routine lesbian couple that do get discriminated against. And I see it as protecting that freedom and protecting that liberty and saying, no, that's not a reason to infringe upon it.
Thanks. My thoughts are, it's, as I started, when we first talked, I guess I disagree a little bit. I brought this up, I think, probably about 6 weeks ago, and asked, so I think everybody's been aware that it's been on our minds for a while, and I think we've had quite a while to with what's going on in our county to know and understand the issues that are related to it. So I think the concept has been out in our community for quite a while. But I would say that, in my opinion, I think this is the right thing to do. It's the treating people equally. It's the right thing to do, being fair. And I think we've had time to get feedback from the constituents. I don't know that more time would change anything or be helpful to the discussion. And from what I'm hearing, I don't know that more time would probably change anybody's perspective on where they sit tonight. So I would be open to whatever the will of the council is. If we want to move forward and someone wants to make a motion, we can decide and on the ordinance before us, or we can go another course, whatever someone might wish to do.
So, point of order, when asked earlier if this was discussion or action items, it is an action item then.
I said it may or may not, we may or may not take action on it. If you'd like a couple of minutes, sure.
I've coreless. 20 years of my life was on the road as a seminar trainer doing hiring, firing, labor law. The question I didn't hear addressed tonight was, who do they file a complaint with? What is going to be the response of the city in terms of who pays the bills? I've been a victim of discrimination lawsuits for rental property. Cost me $5,000 to prove I didn't do a thing, but there went $5,000 out of my life. Anytime you add something to the law that says you can't, somebody's going to say, yeah, I'll see about that. And so my view is, who is going to be the enforcer? What are the penalties? What are the financial obligations of the winning party, if it is the state? Who do you fine and how much?
Well, yeah, the maximum penalty that could be assessed is $1,000. And I mean, I do think to view this as it is true. This is additional regulations that we're putting on the books that the city today does not have. So at that level, I mean, I don't think there's any debate that this is more regulations. But my point from earlier was this doesn't create any. It doesn't put the city in a different, exposed position because of the bathroom issue or, having people that are not intentionally discriminating, being brought up on false charges, that type of thing. But just to the specific questions, the complaint is filed with the city, and as indicated earlier, an investigator would be appointed that would investigate all the facts to determine was there intentional discrimination. After those facts are gathered, it's then presented to a hearing officer, and the hearing officer would hold a hearing, allow each side to say, sort of like a trial, and then the hearing officer would make a determination after hearing all the evidence. So that's sort of how the process would work. That I think when we've discussed this at the staff level, I mean, to be honest, I don't know that we'd ever have a claim. Kevin mentioned the other cities.
Have they had claims?
There have not been any claims that I'm aware of. I know the Olathe, there was a grievance file, but that was on something different. But as far as claims made under these ordinances, I'm not aware of a single one that's been filed. Now, I haven't, called each city to check to see, but just I've not heard of that just in news or, the people I'm familiar with.
So if it hasn't been that much of an issue, we are legislating to legislate an appearance and a feel-good.
I think, again, it's
not an issue that's actually occurring in our area.
Again, I think it's more, you can view it as a civility code. We're just announcing that, at least in the city of DeSoto, it's a policy that
we're imposing regulations on small businesses that potentially would have to put out money to defend claims, just or unjust.
Well, I guess I would, as an employer, I would not be afraid of this at all, because I think as long as employers treat people fairly, then you're not going to draw a claim. I have the chance of worrying about a sexual harassment claim every day. I have a worrying about a false job site injury every day, just as you do. And I don't see that this would create any more exposure, and I think it creates the opportunity at least to say what the level playing field is. It's a risk to be in business every day, and I see this as adding no risk at all if you behave
As a business
fairly.
owner, I see risk in this, especially in the current climate with where these ordinances and things are being tested in cities all around the country, like Portland and other places. There is risk to the small business.
I agree.
Just to
we
note,
live in
it's-
risk every day.
It only applies to employers that have 4 or more employees. And I understand that still is a small business. But unlike the federal law where, the winning employee can be awarded attorney fees, the maximum penalty that could ever be awarded is $1,000. So even if you as the employer admitted that, I'll just admit I discriminate against the person, the maximum you would ever pay would be $1,000 for that violation.
Patrick, can I ask a kind of question on the language?
Sure.
Under the interpretation, so it's page 6, very bottom, G1B, when it talks about rental properties, nothing in this article applied to the sale or rental of any single-family home, or provided the following conditions are met. B, the house is sold or rented without the use of a real estate broker. Why is that? Why is there a distinguish being given between for sale by owner and bottom of page 6?
Well, for one, this track's identical to the Kansas Human Rights Act. So
Okay.
with regard to, so this language is identical to
Okay.
what is in the existing state law. So, and I think what it's trying to get at is if you're an individual homeowner that you sell your house, you're sort of, I guess you're not engaging in commerce, but it's trying to
So you're
capture
held
that
harmless
small,
a bit.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that language comes right out of the Kansas Human Rights Act.
Is the process that you outlined in enforcement, starting in the middle of page 7 on down, is that process comparable to processes that are being followed in other communities?
Yeah, it's identical.
So I think I know the answer to this, but why is it the city administrator that's notified and not your position, the city attorney? Where it says a complaint shall be filed with the city administrator.
Yeah.
Just
I
curious.
think just as being the head, staff person at the city, we could, certainly that could be changed to city attorney. I think.
So it's more of a hierarchy. It's
Yeah.
because
Right.
the city administrator is your boss.
Right. And
I presume-
obviously, if that was involved the city administrator, it would need to be someone else.
I presumed also there was an element of the fact that you would be representing the city, and so it would be initiated through somebody other than who's representing the city.
Correct.
Those are the only questions I had on the language.
You know, lastly, like I said again, I see this as just a fair statement, a show statement that we just don't want people to discriminate out there. And as we have businesses looking at our city in the future, I think this is a key piece to show good faith that we really mean that we don't want people to be discriminated against, and we have those opportunities coming soon. So
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Well, Mayor, if we can move forward, and if I had an ordinance number, I would.
Lana,
make a
you had a
motion.
comment you were gonna make. What?
I was gonna give you an ordinance number.
Oh, okay.
Earlier,
Sorry.
when someone mentioned it, but it'd be ordinance number 2481.
Well, I'll make a motion.
Sorry. So, did you just reserve that number for?
I did.
In the-
because
okay.
it had been on the prior one,
Okay.
since we moved
Yeah.
3A to underneath.
Yep. Okay.
reserved it, Patrick.
Got it.
I had it wrong as well. Thank you, Patrick.
I will make a motion to approve ordinance number 2481, an ordinance amending chapter 5 of the DeSoto City Code to include new article 1, prohibiting intentional discrimination within the city on the basis of a person's gender identity and/or sexual orientation.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions regarding the motion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, item 5, executive session. Do we have anything to talk about in executive session?
No executive session.
I was
for
hoping
me
we'd
this
have a
evening.
property thing or something
Oh,
coming
no.
up
I
someday.
have a report.
All right, advisory reports. Mike, what do you got?
Just one reminder, our employee appreciation lunch, employee Christmas lunch essentially will be next Friday, the 13th. We're inviting the council to attend that as city officials. The mayor has graciously offered to quasi cater the event. He's a champion barbecue contestant, so he'll be preparing ribs.
Yeah, ribs. Ribs, brisket.
The works.
The work.
in
Pork
other
butt.
words. Yeah.
And,
So if you can peel away around lunchtime, we'll be having the lunch down at the senior center around noon on the 13th. It is employee appreciation, so we do have a budget, line item budget for employee appreciation for those sorts of things. Just a heads up, I'm considering a modest monetary a gift to each employee. It'll be something that's reasonable, well within my spending authority, but I wanted you to be aware that was happening. Unfortunately, it'll be taxable income for the employees, so we'll have to let them know when that happens. And it's also the reveal of our Secret Santa. Each year we have a Secret Santa event that goes on that whole week, and then we reveal who the Santas are at that time. So there'll be some fun going on next Friday. So I wanted to give you that update, and that was it from me this
All
evening.
right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Patrick.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Brad, you still here?
I'm here. The only thing I wanted to just point out, we are working on our Pacer Street evaluation, so hopefully we will put in recommendations for street improvements earlier in 2020 than we have.
Okay. And I would let everybody know that by watching the Planning Commission on video, I found out that they will not be having a meeting in December.
That's right.
All right, Lana, what do you got for us tonight?
I have nothing this evening, Mayor.
All
Thank
right. Danny, are you ready to talk?
I'm good, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Kevin?
I just have two things, both dealing with streets. Have we had any chance to check that 83rd and Corliss culvert issue on that, west side?
Yeah, we've been out there a couple times, head scratching on that. I think that's gonna be something we need to consider in our CIP. We're gonna need to probably replace the culvert that goes under Corliss to be able to extend that out. It's gonna be some curb in, or area inlets to take those two ditches in. It's not quite something we're comfortable tackling ourselves as a quick fix. In the meantime, we are gonna get an object marker, at least, by that culvert, the one where they have those old style concrete kind of guardrails that
Right,
cast it.
little-
Well, that one's gone on the west edge of that, so we'll get an object marker up there. But we're thinking it's probably a capital improvement item for next year.
And the other one is, Mike and I talked to, on High Street, there is a private drive, in the middle, about 8,500 or so, that dead ends into, it can't be deemed a private drive because there's a piece of partial land back there that has to be, accessible. And so, I was asking Mike if we could make it, a public street and see what the council thought about that.
Yeah, this has been a bit of a sticky wicket for us for decades.
Is it a public street or it can be a public alley?
Or alley, whatever you like. What do you like?
Whichever, yeah.
So it is, I mean, it looks like it's platted road, right, Mike?
It is platted right of way.
I mean,
yeah,
it is
so,
a public street.
So
right?
this is
I
right.
mean, it's
And
in a
who
public
owns it?
right of way.
What's brought this up, may I ask?
Complaints of the homeowner
Yeah.
about
On the-
people parking on it, about the property next to it, the decrepit,
Right, which is all true on that.
yeah. I
So,
mean, and the fact that if
Codes
he has to
issue.
maintain it, then people are parking on what he has to maintain because he's told he has to maintain it right now. So
right. Yeah.
that's what brought it up.
Yeah, so when the house was built, it was constructed as kind of as a private drive back to that house, and the city had never accepted any obligations for maintenance or snow plowing or anything, but it's in a public right of way. So we can't really keep the neighbor from parking there. So it's been this sort of troublesome issue with every owner that's lived there, and this has been the third at least that's had this issue. And I think there's merit to considering just having the city to just take it over. It's just ours, and we'll provide maintenance for it. So we were going to kick that around some more internally and maybe bring that back as a
And is that
as
the
an
preference of
advisory
the
item.
homeowner?
I'm sorry.
Is that the preference of the homeowner?
Certainly would be the
Yeah,
preference of the
that's what I was thinking when I
Say
had
from
spoke with
my
him.
discussions with him, it's either let me control it like it's my driveway or take it over and
Right. And we can't let him control it like it's his driveway because we would otherwise have landlocked parcels back here. Now, it just so happens that this parcel is owned by this owner right now, and this parcel is owned by this person. So ownership-wise, there isn't, but that could change.
Did that house change ownership?
This one did.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've...
So did the parcel behind it change ownership? too?
Yeah, that's frustrated our code enforcement efforts on this house a bit.
In the middle of the
Delayed.
enforcement action,
There's a whole
it
side of
changed.
the house.
Yeah,
Side
yeah,
on it,
right.
as I
Yeah,
recall.
I'm aware of the house.
And those platted strips are in the possession of the city?
Yeah, these are public right-of-way, not taxed. Yep.
And that was the same conversations that I had with him. And Mike and I originally talked about snow removal, and he didn't really care about snow removal.
The
And how
owner
tough- yeah,
can-
and
yeah.
how tough that was there, but Mike didn't see a big issue with it. I know it's kind of hard to turn in there, and I didn't want to see any more backing out.
Yeah, we
things
don't
of
wanna-
that nature. So
Back if we
that
don't-
does
Right.
become a problem. He doesn't have a problem with snow removal not being done on that. So just wanted to bring it up again,
All right.
so we could fix it. That's all I have.
Rob?
So, Ravenswood. First of all, I know people have complained about some of the reclamation work of RG Fiber, but they're not the only one that gets complaints. So apparently the whole Water One project running down 83rd Street I've heard so many complaints about that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And one of them the homeowner is just livid and about to sue the hell out of him, excuse the language. Yeah. But the question that is coming up here, zoom in on Ravenswood. I suspect it's temporary, but they did tear the road up across that section as they're laying it in. So I'm assuming it's a temporary patch right now.
Okay.
But I know that I've been contacted and they would like to make sure that actually gets repaired by Water One back to actual status where it's not like you're on a little 3-foot bouncy.
Okay.
What do we
4x4
charge them
section.
for a street cut? I mean, those should be expensive, right? 'Cause
Well-
they could have bored that.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, they cut straight across it. But again, they've taken out like 60 feet worth of trees across one property line just to get pipe down there when they were able to take out one section of that fence and get their pipe in. So
This one. Yeah.
yeah, they were able to do it in one section of fence there, but they had to take out almost 60 feet of trees across another area. So it's been interesting hearing people over there.
How much further west does their line go along 83rd?
They're running down to the next subdivision at least. So
Really?
down to that
Yeah,
street
they're gonna
right
go
there.
down
They're
to
going
here.
at least there, if not further.
Okay, well, we'll close the loop on the.
Sorry, I'm a resident of Ravenswood Lane. Can I comment on the?
Well, sure.
Yes.
Sorry.
All right. Please give Lanny your name and address for the record.
am Elijah Vandecreek, 8175 Ravenswood Lane. Vandecreek, Vandecreek. 8175 Ravenswood Lane. Sorry, I don't know exactly how to do this, but the other thing that didn't get mentioned is Water One. If we could go to the house there on the corner, that tree, underneath it is the water access for Ravenswood. It's piped in through there and given to the rest of the lane through that area. And that tree is going to have to be torn down now as well. So, I don't know why I brought it up,
Well,
but
All right, it was important to you.
sorry.
It's okay. Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Water One has not been real environmentally friendly to the existing aging trees there that are nice, old, large, provide sound barriers in some cases. Yeah, they've been pretty much, we're just going to plow through and strip mine it almost in certain areas.
Okay.
Okay,
you've
well, yeah,
got to
we'll
follow up with-
follow up on the road patch and then the other areas too. I'm not familiar with the road patch. I haven't been up there
Do we
lately.
have right-of-way reclamation
Yeah,
things where they have to restore it back to?
yeah. So we have a right-of-way permitting process, and they do have a right-of-way permit for that. And
So if you go down, actually, the other way.
Wes,
Yeah, I was acting like I was scrolling. So yeah, that way. Keep going down to the next major street.
Cedar Creek.
Right. Okay, back up a little bit. So right by that angled driveway, right there. No, the angled.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, that tree line to the west of it a little bit.
Here?
Right there,
Uh-huh.
going north-south.
Okay.
That's the one that in that right-of-way, they took out almost 50, 60 feet worth of these old, large trees. So it wasn't
Yeah.
just what they needed to. I mean, they blasted through there.
I'm not sure that is in the right. I'm not sure that's not in a private easement that they
Must have had an
purchased.
easement, yeah.
Yeah, because you can see the right of way line. As I recall, they were off of that. They were kind of down in here. So
Yeah,
property lines, so that property
the white is
been to the ones on the corner down there, not the owner where the driveway
yeah, and that,
right.
I mean, looking at that easement, it looks like some of the areas they've been have not been in the right of ways, but are in private property.
From
in
what
some
I've seen,
areas.
just driving through, they've been on the north side of the fence, like up the hill and into
Yeah.
Lenexa. It looked like they've been on private property.
They
most of
acquired. They must have acquired easement through
yeah,
there to
yeah.
build their project.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then they wouldn't necessarily need
It
a
wouldn't be
right-of-way
under the
permit
it
from
wouldn't-
us.
Okay.
It's on that landowner. If that landowner said take the trees, then they're taking the trees. But I need to check on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I know he said
Our
they-
street cut though would be nice.
Well, certainly, yeah.
I
absolutely.
know he said they could go through the tree line, but not like they did.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
all right, that's it.
Thank you, Rob. Lori, anything tonight?
Oh, no, nothing to follow all of that.
Kevin? I just have one thing to remind you all. Saturday night is our lighting, tree lighting. So, 5:30 is our revised start time with singing and bands, and then the lighting at 6 o'clock. Dinner by the Rotary in the community, in the senior center. Encourage everybody to come.
And Santa Claus.
Oh, and the arts, yeah, and the arts council is going to have arts on display for sale too, or everything's for sale. All right, so come enjoy, and I would now entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.